Hello, everybody. This is Noah and John, and we are from Urban Digs, and this is Talking Manhattan. And Johnny, we got a good one for you today. We got an old colleague, an old friend, Raphael De Niro of the De Niro Team. I mean, I really don't think this guy needs an introduction. He's been in business for almost 20 years, since 2004, does hundreds of millions of dollars sales annually. I think he's done over $4 billion in sales cumulative. And we got him for the next 15, 20 minutes to share what he is seeing on the ground, boots in the ground today. And Raphael, I'm going to get right to it. Please tell us and tell our audience what you see that is going on in the markets today.
Sure. Good morning, guys, and thanks for having me on. One of the big changes I've noticed over the last, I'd say, 9 to 12 months is there seems to be a real bifurcation between unrenovated apartments or townhouses and renovated ones. There was always somewhat of a delta, and it would take a lot longer to sell unrenovated places versus sort of turnkey triple mint. But that delta in terms of velocity and pricing, velocity meaning how long it takes to market and sell, has certainly increased over the last year, maybe even the last 18 months. So aside from that, one of the other things that I've noticed recently is there seems to be a outsized phenomenon of off-market apartment sales. It seems to be all categories kind of above, I'd say, 3 to 4 million. There was always a bit of that in the market at the very high end or the super prime category, say north of 25 or 30 million. But it was really a phenomenon that sort of took hold, I thought, in kind of LA and Palm Beach at the ultra high end or super prime market. It wasn't something we saw a lot here. Now it's kind of permeated the entire luxury market, and I'm sort of getting more inbound solicitations from brokers pitching off-market properties than I ever have in 20 years, by far, 10x the number that I ever did previously. So that, I think, is partly a COVID phenomenon, but just other kind of shifting trends that often start in California. I've noticed even the team concept really came from California. There were no teams in New York City when I started. Maybe there were one or two, but there were a lot of teams in the West Coast market, and that sort of is a kind of similar shift over a much longer time frame.
Awesome. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground in the first 30 seconds. I mean, this is just awesome. I want to go back to one of the things that you mentioned early on, which is that difference between renovated versus unrenovated. And this is one of the analyses that we've been doing, and we've kind of seen the same thing, which is that spread is really sort of blown out, especially after COVID, and it hasn't seemed to close as you would normally expect it. And I'm curious, when you look at that delta, is it something that can be cured by price? I mean, if you price an unrenovated unit, I mean, way below what a renovated unit would cost, can you still close that gap, or are there structural challenges that buyers are looking at? Like they just don't even want to deal with it regardless of the price.
Yeah, I think that in one sense, they don't want to deal with it. And also renovations take a really long time. And in some aspects, they take longer than they used to. Part of that is kind of legacy or hangover supply chain issues from the pandemic. And also the cost of a renovation has gone up dramatically. All of the different sort of components that are required are much more expensive than they were prior to COVID. So I think those are the kind of two main reasons why people don't seem to be quite as eager to embark on renovations as they used to. I remember back in the day, we kind of used to tell people the way to create value in Manhattan is to do a renovation. But that does not seem to be quite as worthwhile as a proposition as it used to.
Raphael, what about on the sell side? Are sellers aware? I'm curious to know how aligned sellers are with reality of the condition of their property. Are most sellers aware of this phenomenon of the penalty of, it's not just unrenovated. I feel like if you have a property that was renovated 7 years ago but needs updates, you're in that unrenovated category.
Yeah, that is a very astute comment, and I should have mentioned that. From an appraisal standpoint, if I'm not mistaken, and there might be some argument about this, but roughly 8 to 10 years, the value of your renovation goes to zero effectively. There are exceptions to that rule, like a historic kind of museum quality restoration. That might be an exception, but generally speaking, you're absolutely right. So that's also a really important point. I think people who are going to market with estate sale condition apartments know that there's going to be, a major renovation involved. But there is some kind of cognitive dissonance with places that are 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, or maybe a really incredible renovation at the time, but it was really beaten up and shop worn by a lot of traffic and lots of people or pets. And those sellers in many cases have not had the benefit of sort of touring a lot of brand new triple mint turnkey places. So that can be difficult if it's not like in such a state of disrepair that it's obvious that it's going to be completely renovated. And by the way, that creates a whole other issue in co-ops, which I've been dealing with for 20 years, which is, the sort of conundrum people get in families typically with estate sales. The co-op board really wants to maintain the value of the shares in the building. And the average person just perusing online may not know the sort of nuance and detail of the condition of an apartment. And there's often a struggle where the board, doesn't really like the price that's being proposed by a prospective buyer, but that buyer is taking into account that, they may have a 3-year renovation on their hands. Some of those buildings have summer work rules. You can only work in the summer, et cetera. And sometimes that will tank a board application. And in fact, I only recall one turn down in my life, in my career, and that was the exact reason. The board just could not accept the price, but the price was reflective of a 3-year, $1,500 a foot renovation that was required.
Yeah, crazy dynamics and slow markets when you have that kind of stuff going on. Yeah. I want to circle back to what we were discussing before. I know that you have glimpses of the ultra high end. I know you see the high end, the ultra high end. What are you seeing there? Are you seeing anything notable? Pied-a-terres, anything going on there, or any local sectors, local areas of Manhattan that might be outperforming others?
Sure. So the pied-a-terre market to me is really robust. And in some ways it's more robust than the primary user market at the very high end. I've noticed that a lot of clients and different people that I've dealt with, and just anecdotal situations, a lot of people who have sort of transplanted themselves to different states, if they're at that kind of super prime level in terms of real estate, they don't really sell their apartments here. A lot of them seem to be keeping them as pied-a-terres, using them as, hotel suites effectively for friends and family and when they come to the city. And we are seeing a little bit of an uptick in foreign buyers coming back. That had really ebbed, especially during the Trump years, and it's starting to increase a little bit. One of the pockets or one of the submarkets that would be a beneficiary of that is Hudson Yards, where we're seeing quite a bit of that activity now.
Interesting. And, this brings up another point, which is that, when it comes down to it, especially in Manhattan and Brooklyn, real estate it's a very, very hyper local thing. Like condos in Hudson Yards, new buildings are going to be trading vastly different than, say, 10-year-old condos in Midtown, only a few blocks away. And so yeah. I want to use that as a jumping point to talk about negotiability and discounts out there, because we often like to talk about discounted rates sort of at a median level. Like, here's what you can expect on a median level, half above, half below. But I'm curious, when you get down there and you're seeing, the listing behind you is absolutely beautiful. The discount for that might be something totally different than, say, a co-op in Yorkville. Sure. And I'm curious if you could talk to discounts and some of the negotiability that you're seeing right now.
Sure. Discounts are kind of all over the place. You even actually still are seeing not quite bidding wars. There are some that I've experienced and heard of in the last year, but you're seeing places sometimes trade for ask more frequently than I was, let's say, a year ago. But there are also discounts that can range from anywhere from 5 to 15% in some cases. Hudson Yards is one of the buildings that was discounting heavily from what the original Schedule A prices were set at pre-COVID and during the beginning of COVID. So that's a circumstance where, there's a couple $1 billion of inventory across a couple of buildings for them to sell still. And they are in a position where they can do that. And it's not because of distress or because of some problem under the surface. It's just like to your point, a hyper local situation where you're seeing good discounts, but there's a reason for it. Then there's other situations with resale apartments. Like I just said, I heard about an apartment that went into contract after a few days in Tribeca last week, even on a shortened holiday week, and it went at the ask. And this was just never even put on the market. And you have to assume when something's not put on the market, the asking price is going to be full for sure, right? It's not going to be like a discounted asking price. So we're in a somewhat inventory constrained environment. That's part of what's driving that. I read a figure recently, which was that we've had the lowest number of multifamily permit applications filed in Manhattan this year since 2010. That kind of tells you all you need to know about the inventory landscape.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, right? And you know, John, we talked about a couple of years ago that there's going to be a potential inventory problem going on for all these reasons. How are they building? I mean, there's restrictive financing, right? Raphael, we were talking before the show. There's the capital markets are not very amenable right now to giving out money. There's a lot of gloomy stuff going on. It's a transactional hit. I don't know what the price hit is yet. I mean, our models say that we're down 7, 8, 9%. I don't know from March, April. I don't know what that's ultimately going to show. But when I look at the market, I mean, it feels like it's been 5 stabs, you know, and we're at that 5th stab, and it's like, all right, it's starting to hurt a little bit. I'm starting to bleed. I was able to handle the first couple, but now it's a little too much. Because it's the duration of this and the environment. And now you got commission structures, rough data. How does this market get out of this?
I think it's just going to take time. You know, the one thing I can't help, just given that I started back in 2004, I can't help but think a lot about the sort of Lehman event, September 15, 2008, the lead up to Lehman and the aftermath. That really kind of, for me, crystallized what New York City real estate is about, which is, it feels to me almost like an 8-lane superhighway, like I-95, and you have all of these cars and traffic coming and going in each direction, and occasionally there's an accident, and it creates a pileup, and you have an issue for a while. It could be 6 months, could be a year, could be 2 years, but then demand from all over the world and all over the rest of the country, and from local demand, builds up invariably, and it has to be satiated somehow. And I think that will happen on the other side of this kind of unusually high rate environment. And again, you know, when I started, rates were not that much different than they are now. I think they were around 6.5. And, you know, the market was moving along quite well at that time.
Well, let me just say, I'm glad you said that. And the reason why is I'm going to get a little bit on my soapbox here, which is that I absolutely love this city. I mean, it's the kind of thing where I will go away, I'll come in, and I'm, you know, coming back from the airport, and you can see the skyline. You think like, I'm home. I love it here. Yeah. I love getting out. I love walking on the streets and seeing 1,000 other people. I mean, it's a social experience. And I think that, you know, the whole work from home phenomenon, which drove folks to the suburbs, I think it's great if that's what you want to do. But I think there's that human element that's missing from that. And I think we're going to eventually kind of come back to it. And I'm excited to see where this city goes from that. I mean, don't get me wrong. The traffic is horrible. It smells from time to time, and it's a crowded city, but it's a vibrant, energetic city. And I completely agree with you, Raphael, that it's like I-95 after an accident. We're sitting in that lane waiting to go. And one of the things that crossed my mind when you were talking is that I know you've done a lot of stuff downtown, and there's a lot of revitalization that happened downtown. You look at the Tribeca neighborhoods coming up, the Hudson area coming up. And as you look at Manhattan and you kind of look at some of the new neighborhoods that are popping up, even Hudson Yards, for example, do you think that there's room for development on the scale that brings people back to the city in such that it's going to be a remarkable place to live in the next, say, 10 to 15 years?
I'm not sure. The development that is most sorely needed to make that happen is probably workforce housing, and not necessarily just affordable housing, but housing for the middle class. That seems to be where we're really falling short here. In terms of office and the other sort of food groups or categories, I think that we have enough established to always attract a lot of people to want to move here and live here. But we seem to not have nearly enough different categories of housing to people.
Right. Yeah, no, I tend to agree. I'm very curious to see how this wraps up because I'm in full agreement there.
Yeah, the thing to me about New York City, that we do have that I don't think is going away is we have the greatest hospitals, universities, museums, anywhere on the planet. And I, for one, have clients who come from the Middle East and they stay in a hotel suite or in a long-term rental for 6 months while they get cancer treatments for themselves or a family member at Sloan Kettering. They're never going to stop coming as long as Sloan Kettering is there.
Yeah, and we're an international reach. And, there could be an argument made that there's always sideline cash, the sideline cash theory, the pent-up demand theory. And one could say there's always out there, you can't really measure it, with stocks, my argument would be that it's a zero-sum game. For every buyer, there's a seller. I guess you could say the same for here. But, I'm going to fire a couple of questions. And John, this is going to go to you too. Raphael first and John. What is your feeling on pent-up demand for this market? Because it has been a low transactional market for quite a few months.
Me first?
Sure, Raphael, you go first.
Yeah, so I mean, I again, this is just kind of looking back at 9/11, which I kind of had a front row view of literally and figuratively. I was living in the financial district at that time on John Street. Seeing what happened downtown post 9/11, I saw a 6 to 9 month freeze after the event, and then a pretty sizable amount of activity on the heels of that. After Lehman, September 15, 2008, that bounce back was much more pronounced. For us, meaning me and my team, it started in spring of 2010. That's when we started kind of getting out there, doing some sales. We were a little surprised. By the end of 2010, we were pretty much back to a decent amount of activity. And by 11, even better. And 12 ended up being one of our best years. So I would expect that to happen again. I think rates would have to dip below 5%, and not the Fed rate, but mortgage rates. And I think that would unleash quite a bit of demand. I think it would unleash a lot of people moving who are stuck in, sub 4% mortgages who don't want to move. And it would definitely stimulate a bunch of activity. And I think, in the next couple of years, that will happen. Let's see.
John?
Well, first, I'm honored to share the spotlight, and I agree with everything Raphael said. And I think that you look at where rates are now, and it's no surprise that the market really just stopped on a dime in April of 2022, right? That second week, right after taxes went out, April 2022, the contract sign numbers just started plummeting, and we've been in this extended pause. Now, I'm in agreement that a lot of this has to do with rates, and I don't think it's necessarily the height of rates. It's more of the expectation of what future rates are. So if we can kind of bring rates down to a more normal long-term level and stay there, I think Raphael's absolutely right. I think that's going to grease the wheels on the buy side, which is important, but also the sell side, which has just been locked up for so long. And, I'm really hoping, and I'm bullish on Manhattan real estate, given the information I have today. So don't at me if I'm wrong here, because I'm speculating. But I do think that we are in what I'm hoping is a pause that refreshes. And I think once we get to the the spring, I'm hoping we're going to see a little bit more listing volume. The buyer will start coming back because it's still a great market for buyers. And because there's low activity, you got the negotiation, you got the choice. So hopefully we can kind of get this machine running again without any of the panic that's marked some of the other episodes in which the buy side just kind of walked away from the ball. So
yeah, and I was much more worried like middle of 18 when I was seeing and hearing about a new 300 unit building being announced every week. Right, it was obvious to me then that there was going to be an issue, and that overhang of new development inventory really kind of zapped the energy out of the market in 18 and 19. There were also some issues with sort of like the taper tantrum in the markets right at the same time from the Fed. But we worked through all of that excess inventory, or the majority of it, through COVID, especially in 21 and a little bit in 22. So in a way, I feel like we have much more of a clean slate for when we do start to recover more meaningfully. I think we're kind of building out a bit of a foundation at the moment.
Yeah, what a great point. Like structurally, the structural dynamics are not really in place for a crash, given what you're talking about here with the inventory situation and the development situation. It seems to it's like putting a piece of a story together in the future that's going to lay the foundation for this potential recovery.
And the new dev boom that we had from 13 to like 17, the really Goldilocks period, that was born out of the capital markets shutting the spigot off after Lehman.
Yeah. Very, very good point. I mean, listen, I love the points that you guys made about rates falling, unlocking sellers to move, because nobody's talking much about that. They're talking about how rates are going to come down, buyers are going to come in, but they're not talking about how rates coming down is going to take away that restrictiveness that a lot of people are locked in. Go ahead, John.
Right, and I was going to say, I don't think it's necessarily the rate itself; it's more what the rate represents. And rates coming down, I mean, even most of the sales in Manhattan are all cash, so it's not, the rate's doesn't really have the effect that most people think it has, but it does have that sort of psychological effect. They see rates come down, it's like, all right, well, the economy's in a better place. It's staying put. There's an element of stability there, which I think is really what speaks to buyers. And I think that we're missing that right now. And as long as that buyer enthusiasm is dampened and sellers are kind of locked in place, we're really not going to get going. And I'm hoping that we can, as I said, restart this in the spring.
Yeah, John, you're absolutely right. I think it's 65% of all transactions in Manhattan below 96th Street, 4 million and up, are all cash.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money chasing properties here. All right,
but also it just hurts the sentiment generally when people keep reading these headlines about 7.5%, 8% mortgages, to John's point.
Exactly.
It's a sentiment issue. Yeah.
Totally agree. All right, we got one last question. We're almost out of time, and I'm just going to wrap it up after this. This has been really, really fun and informative, and I want to circle back around to the agents, the professional agents that are listening to this, and hopefully some agents have gained some actionable insights and nuggets of wisdom. I know I have. From this conversation. And Raphael, what could agents do in this challenging environment right now to maybe sow the seeds for productivity growth down the road?
Yeah, this is the time to do it. So there is no better time than a bit of a slowdown to raise your level of education, right? Read voraciously anything that you can, trade publications, the Journal, Bloomberg, anything related to markets, and real estate, which are all kind of intrinsically tied, as well as getting out and seeing every building that you haven't been in, going to as many open houses and previews as you possibly can. Becoming familiar with who the developers are, who the brokers are, the brokerage heads, all of those holes that you may have in your sort of knowledge set. This is the time to fill them. In addition to that, I think it's really good to be doing continuing ed. During COVID, I just decided to get my construction manager's certificate, not for any specific reason. I just felt like I didn't quite understand some of the ins and outs of the construction business that I kind of felt like I should as a broker. That was a certificate that was offered from Pace University. I did it on Zoom. It was great. Those are the kind of things that you want to be doing now when you have some downtime.
I'm actually taking notes on that one. That's awesome stuff.
Hey, listen, you're an advisor. If I was a buyer or seller, I would want my real estate broker to be an expert on the market. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be a Sherpa, period.
Yeah. I love it. I love your Sherpa. Yeah. This has been fantastic. Raphael, you're the man. It's great to spend some time with you. We need to do it more often. I feel like it's been too long. But thank you for the time. Raphael De Niro of the De Niro team over at Elliman. That is John Walkup. I am Noah Rosenblatt. This has been a Talking Manhattan podcast, and we will catch you guys next time.